The river had gone near silent beneath its winter blanket, save for the low groan of shifting ice and the occasional whisper of wind threading through the canyon. Snow fell in patient drifts, soft as breath. The air was all white and weightless, and it seemed the world had paused in mid-thought. Boaz Cutter rode through that hush like a shadow, broad-shouldered, solemn, a giant in worn buckskin and a slouch hat dusted with snow. His horse, Ghost, moved slow beneath him, hooves muffled in powder. He was checking fence lines, though there were no cattle foolish enough to wander now. Truth be told, he rode more for the stillness. Some men drank to quiet the voices inside. Boaz rode out into silence. A flicker caught the corner of his eye, movement along the riverbank. He reined in Ghost and stared. The wind swept his breath sideways, and for a moment it was just the ice and the snow and his own pulse ticking in his ears. Then he saw it again, something dark tangled in the reeds, half submerged. He was off the horse before he knew it, boots crunching through crusted snow, heart clenching with an old dread he couldn't name. The slope was steep and slick, but he didn't slow. The shape was a woman, limp, barely clothed, long black hair tangled over a face gone pale as the sky. Boaz reached her, plunging his arms into the freezing water, lifting her body with a gentleness that startled even him. She was light, frighteningly so. The kind of light that makes a man think about death. Her lips were tinged blue. Her pulse, a ghost itself. Boaz didn't speak, just cradled her close and climbed the bank again, snow soaking into his coat, teeth clenched against the cold. Ghost knelt at his command, and Boaz laid her across the saddle, mounting behind. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her against his chest. She didn't shiver. That was the worst of it. The ride back to his cabin felt longer than it was. Snow thickened and the wind turned sharp. He whispered to her, nonsense mostly. Words like almost there, and stay, and don't go. He hadn't begged anyone for anything in a long time. The fire roared by the time he laid her down. He'd stripped off her wet dress with his eyes closed, wrapped her in blankets, rubbed her limbs with flannel. Every move carried care, but he knew what it looked like. A man alone with an unconscious woman in the wood. Her skin was marble cold. Her chest rose, barely. Boaz sat beside the cot, watching the firelight dance over her face. She looked so small there, like something misplaced by the world. When she opened her eyes the next morning, they were the color of storm-washed earth. She blinked once, twice. Then, seeing him, she flinched. She tried to speak but failed. He didn't try to fill the silence. 4 days she didn't speak at all. She watched him from beneath a woven blanket while he moved through the cabin in silence, cooking simple food, fixing broken hinges, tending the fire. He left bowls of broth near her, which she drank without ever meeting his eyes. Boaz was not used to being looked at. Not really. Townfolk glanced at him sideways, just enough to measure how quickly they could move past. But her gaze, when it came, was different. Unafraid. Not unkind. He noticed things. How her hands trembled slightly when she ate. How she kept her legs folded beneath her even when it hurt. How she stared at the door like it might bite her. So he carved her animals. Small ones. A fox, a deer, a wolf with one ear bent. Left them on the table each morning. She never touched them. Until one night she did. He saw her holding the wolf, turning it over in her hands like something alive. She set it gently back down but not far from her heart. "Boaz," he said, finally, voice low and rough from disuse. She looked at him. "That's my name." She hesitated. "Helen," she said, voice cracked like old bark. That was the first time they looked at each other without flinching. Snow kept falling. Weeks passed in slow spirals. The silence between them softened. One night, wolves came down from the hills. Their cries echoed through the trees, not close, but close enough. Boaz grabbed his rifle, instinct flaring. "No," Helen said behind him. Just one word, but it rooted him in place. "They're mourning," she whispered, stepping beside him. They sat by the fire after, listening to the wild. She told him then, in slow fragments, about the people who had cast her out. That she was of the Shoshone but no longer welcome. That she'd done nothing wrong, but her grief had frightened them. She hadn't tried to live. She'd tried to vanish. The river had nearly obliged. He told her about a boy, 12, caught in crossfire during a skirmish he was ordered into. Boaz had pulled the trigger. Still didn't sleep right. They didn't say sorry. Didn't touch. Just sat. And it was more healing than words. One morning, the snow thinned. They rode to town for medicine. The streets hushed when they walked through. Eyes narrowed. Lips curled. Deputy Gentry stood on the porch of the saloon like a man born to suspicion. "You keepin' her out there with you, Cutter?" Boaz didn't answer. He didn't need to. Helen's hand brushed his as they passed. Back at the cabin, she threw the wolf carving into the fire. He watched it blacken, curl, and catch. But her eyes looked clearer. Later, she told him the truth. Her body had been failing before the river. An illness. Something in the blood. There were no words in her tongue for it, just the knowing. She'd gone to the river to surrender. Boaz listened. Stared at the fire so long his vision blurred. That night, a storm rolled in hard and fast. The walls shivered in their seams. They argued, sharp and quiet. "Why do you keep everyone away?" she asked, voice rising. He didn't answer right away. "Because they don't stay." She broke then, tears hot despite the cold. "I wasn't trying to live," she said. "But now I don't know how to die." She collapsed not long after. Fevered. Burning from within. He carried her to the cot, wiped her brow, held her hand through the worst of it. Whispered stories. Half-true things. His mother's favorite hymn. The way the land smelled in summer. "You stay, Helen Snowbird. Stay, and I'll make sure the world is gentle this time." He didn't sleep that night. When dawn came, pale gold and trembling, she opened her eyes. "You look tired," she said, barely audible. "You scared the hell out of me," he replied, and for once he smiled. They sat outside later, side by side, wrapped in blankets. The sun touched the snow like a kiss. A hawk circled high above. She hummed a melody too old for names. He didn't know the tune, but he memorized the sound. Their fingers brushed. Stayed. He didn't need to ask her to stay. She already had. And years later, when the river froze again and the wind returned, Boaz would sit by the fire, holding a half-burned carving of a wolf. "Funny," he'd whisper, voice like wind through pine, "how you think you're saving someone, and it's you who ends up saved." Then he'd smile, slow and quiet, and say to no one in particular, "If you find someone lost in the cold, stay a while. Maybe all they need is a little warmth they forgot they deserved."